Hey BookTube, Chelsea the Reading Outlaw here in the craft room at work to do a little discussion video with you guys. I had originally filmed this at home in my normal setting, but the video file got corrupted somehow, and so I am refilming it here today on my lunch break at work. And yeah, so that explains the change in scenery. But today is a discussion video that I wanted to do about a little bit like the mainstreaming of YouTube and whether that's a thing, but also about barriers to access or barriers to entry. This is something that, as a librarian working in more of an urban and semi-urban environment, that we actually talk about a lot in terms of my job, but it, for whatever reason, was never actually something that I considered in terms of YouTube until I watched Rincey's video about it, which I'll link to down below, and she discusses a variety of different issues dealing with like YouTube and kind of the mainstreaming of that and barriers to access and entry. So I wanted to kind of talk about some of those things. And yeah, that's the video that we're doing today. So grab some tea, grab a snack, buckle in, sit down, let's chat. So to begin with, I always like to kind of provide operational definitions. When I am talking about the mainstreaming of YouTube and barriers to access and entry, I mean kind of this idea and this phenomenon that seems to be happening in the YouTube community kind of more at large. But that we can also see shades of here in the booktube community, which is kind of this slow shift towards quality of production and this slow kind of bent towards YouTube videos and especially like web series and a lot of these things moving further and further towards like high professional development in terms of quality. So, HD cameras, very good lighting, professional acting, special effects, scenery, all of these kinds of things that push YouTube from being kind of like a user-centric, more real media form and into being more of this kind of thing where it's kind of a lot like TV that just happens to be free access. That may not be the best description of it. That's how I am interpreting it, and that's the operation that I am working on. And this plays into this kind of like dilemma of issues of access and barriers to entry, which are basically all the things that we don't think of that kind of keep people from being able to participate in this community or in any community, and how those are bad. Those aren't good things. You want a person's non-participation in anything to be by choice, not by force of circumstances. And so, hearing Rincey talk about it and kind of thinking about it myself in terms of like my job, a lot of barriers to entry are usually either racially or socioeconomically related or both. And we see a lot of that same thing in YouTube. A big quality of YouTube and a big thing that a lot of people and supporters of YouTube put out there and believe is that YouTube is so great because like anybody can do it. It's YouTube. It's user created media that can then be like spread to the world. So, underprivileged populations that don't necessarily have an outlet in normal media, voices that aren't necessarily going to be heard in the mainstream can find their home on YouTube. And this is absolutely true. But there are so many factors that are necessary to allow that to happen that I think are kind of subconscious because of the way that we are, and by we, I mean those who live in the Western world or the kind of first country developed nations world, and the way that because of that and because of so many just, implicit factors, how that affects the way that we view things. And I am just as guilty of this as everybody else. But really, when you think about it, I make these videos on my phone. I have a Samsung Note. It's a very nice phone, but I make all my videos on my phone, and then I edit them in Windows Movie Maker, which is an even worse free editing software than like iMovie. It literally does not do anything cool. That's why I always have to do the choppy like book cover inserts as opposed to doing like a nice overlay, because editing software that can do those nice overlays, if you don't have an Apple product, is actually very expensive, or can be very expensive if you want it to be able to have no limits on it. They have free programs, but they all have limits on them. All of that is even beside the point of the fact that in order to have a video to edit, you need to have a device to record on. And like I said, I film on my phone. My phone is capable of doing HD video. And even then, I myself am frequently struggling with issues of quality, with issues of lighting, with issues of what's behind me, all of these kind of aesthetic issues that a lot of booktubers think about, and that I've had multiple discussions with, with multiple booktubers about, that all even hinge on having a recording device to begin with. Not to mention that recording device needs to then be able to transport its digital video feed to either the internet or another device that has the internet. And then you need the internet itself. The internet itself, we pay like $100 a month for internet where Mark and I live. We pay, and that's not even with cable, that's just straight basic internet access. And that is something that not everybody has. And it's important to realize that. And it's hard to realize that because I live a life where it's so easy to just be able to pick up your device or your smartphone or to go to a computer and what have you, and to Google an answer and to get the answer you find, or to find a voice that represents you. And if you can't do that because you don't possess the right keys to those entry barriers, you're not going to be able to do that. And now I hear you saying, well, what if you're not a content creator? What if you're just a content viewer? Even that supposes that you have the internet and that you have a device capable of receiving an internet connection. To me, it all relates to, it's a very interesting article that I read. I think it was by Kelly Jensen at Book Riot. I will see if I can find it. If not, if you know this article, please feel free to tweet me the link. And it is basically a discussion about how we need to stop giving free ebooks to people, because, or at least using free ebooks as an enticement method, because that assumes so many things about the people that you're trying to offer to. Hers was specifically in terms of libraries, but just in general, think about it. If you're running a promotion or you want people to come in and you're willing to offer them a free ebook to do that, you're supposing that they have a device upon which to read that ebook. They have the internet connection necessary to download that ebook to their device, and then they have the excess time to read said ebook leisurely, and that would be considered a rewarding form of payment. It is in my mind incredibly easy to see how somebody who doesn't have the time to read recreationally, or who has many other life concerns and thus doesn't make reading a priority for entertainment, doesn't see any benefit or ideal in getting those free ebooks. And I understand this is a tangent, but to me it all kinds of goes back to recognizing the implicit assumptions and the implicit barriers in what we take to be just very easy, kind of flippant conversations that we have, or in, outlets that we possess, as in when we use YouTube. So I just think that it's incredibly important to remember those things. I don't really have a grand thesis to this video. I just thought it was incredibly important to continue the discussion and to put the word out to be more considerate to those barriers of use. And there are things that we can do. There are things I'm working on doing. Providing links to other videos about these kinds of things are a first step, but also, I'm working to caption my videos, because I didn't realize until Rincey pointed it out in her video that the auto capture closed captioning for YouTube is absolutely awful. And by not providing closed captioning, there's a whole barrier to access that we erect on our own to a group of people who because of that barrier would not be able to participate necessarily in the YouTube community without the effort. And there are other things that go along with that. I would also say that there's kind of this ideological idea that you don't need to have a nice camera. You don't need a DSLR. You don't even need a good phone capable of doing HD. It's your words and your content that are what matter, but it's important to recognize that the vehicles through which your content is delivered don't exist to everybody. And because of that, YouTube is not quite as universal and democratic a place as we would all like to think that it is. And I love YouTube. I love BookTube. I've been in this community for 6 months, minus a little dabbling I did a couple years ago. But for about 6 months now, I've been, really trying to get involved and heavily involved in the BookTube community. And I just think that it's an important part of the conversation that we need to keep in the back of our heads when we are talking about these things, talking about creators versus consumers in terms of content, and excuse me, and the fact that maybe not every, viewer can be a creator. Not every content creator, has access to the things they need to get their voice out there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is to just remember that as much as we love YouTube and as much as we love seeing YouTube and BookTube get more cultural recognition and more acknowledgement as a place of that cultural exchange of ideas, it's important to realize that there are still voices that are being left out. And it's, that we should keep that in mind when we are doing things, is that, it's kind of like a check your privilege. And I do it. I need to do more of it. And I think that it's just something that we should all keep in the back of our heads when we're making videos and whatnot. This has been 10 minutes of me talking my thoughts at you. Please let me know down below what you think, what your thoughts are. If you can think of any other barriers to use that haven't been brought up yet, or if you yourself have faced some, please just let me know what you think in terms of, YouTube going mainstream, barriers to use, checking your privilege for media consumption, all of those things. Leave thoughts down below. I would love to have more conversation about this. As always, like, subscribe, and luckily, I will see you guys later on BookTube. Bye.